That bill is to make sure that Black people are represented in clinical trials. There are a few things and ways that we've been mistreated, but I'm here to tell you that if I had that option, I would have taken it.
If you do have a diagnosis, you need to make sure you're having conversations to understand what's going on with you, what's happening with my body, and to also understand what your treatment options are.
How we can overcome barriers to access and why it's important. And we've got 3 panelists for this session. The first panelist, Stacey Hargraves. She is the Vice President of Innovative Health and Advocacy at Johnson & Johnson, leading a global team to enhance clinical trial experiences. Stacey has a stellar career in biopharma, including roles at Regeneron and pharmaceutical product development. Also on this panel, Diane Nathaniel. Diane is a stage 3 colon cancer survivor and enthusiastic advocate. As an ambassador, constituent team leader with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, she fights for accessible health care for all. Diane co-founded Beat Stage 3 Inc. to raise cancer awareness, and she leads the Village Lighthouse Inc. to support patients navigating the healthcare system. We are also thrilled to have Dr. Davida J. White with us on this panel today. She is a healthcare leader with a rich career spanning government, academia, and the biopharmaceutical industry. She's currently leading the cardiovascular and metabolism field medical affair team at Johnson & Johnson. Please welcome Stacey Hargraves, Diane Nathaniel, and Dr. Davida J. White.
I have the pleasure of sitting with 2 phenomenal women today to talk about early detection and really how we as a community can overcome those barriers to access. So, Diane, very nice to have you and see you today. Can you tell us about your colon cancer journey from a patient to an advocate?
Good morning, everyone. It's so amazing to see so many beautiful Black people in one space caring about their health. So I hope you learned something from my journey. I was diagnosed at age 44, March 7, 2014. And then the screening age was 50. A colonoscopy saved my life. I definitely did not take a colonoscopy exam just because, but I actually went in for a shoulder surgery, and they recognized that my blood levels for my hemoglobin were level 4. How many of us know what the hemoglobin is? Raise your hand. What does it do? Do you know your levels? The average person doesn't. We take blood draws, we get these panels done, and we only look for what's normal and what is abnormal. But we don't really know what our range means and what it should be for it to be a healthy state for us. Backing up to 10 years prior to me being diagnosed, I complained to doctors about chronic constipation, chronic fatigue. I complained about a rapid weight loss, and I was age 34 at that time. And I felt like all of my complaints were ignored. Everything was related to, oh, your cycle, your breastfeeding. I had just had my second daughter. And so for 10 years, complaining about some of these issues that most of us as Black people align with our diets and, oh, it's the way we eat, but we don't consider that those things are always not the best things for us. Those symptoms sometimes go ignored. I was prescribed iron pills. How many of us hear that? You're anemic, take some iron pills. And then when you complain that the iron pills constipate you, they say, well, take a Colace tablet. So I feel like no one ever dug deep enough, tested me in another way to find out what else was wrong. I later learned that it takes a polyp 7 to 10 years to turn into cancer. So imagine at age 44, when at age 34 I complained about the same things, they told me this was going to be my fate. I had rectal bleeding one day, but because my cycle was coming, ladies, we bleed from 2 sources. Men, sorry, gonna be transparent. So I thought my cycle was coming twice a month. I had been bleeding. This specific day, I didn't have a colonoscopy appointment for 2 weeks, but I bled before I could get to that GI doctor. She invited me in. She did something called an anoscopy. So for some of you who are afraid to move right to the colonoscopy, an anoscopy is done in the office with a scope. It's minimal, it's not invasive, and it's just so the doctor could see right then and there what is going on. She noticed that I had some residual blood and that I did have some backup, which she couldn't identify if it was a tumor or stool. So I had the colonoscopy, and she woke me up and told me I had Charlie Brown was in my head. Something, 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 carcinoma, adenoma. So it was like womp, womp, womp. Did you just tell me I have cancer at age 44? I had to have an immediate surgery, removing the cecum part of my colon, 14 lymph nodes, and my appendix, followed by 12 rounds of chemotherapy over a course of 8 months for 48 hours every 2 weeks. I am left infertile. I have neuropathy in my fingertips and my toes. So for those of you who don't understand how important it is, because colon cancer is one of the most beatable and treatable cancers, preventive care and screening will save your life. If you are sitting here and you are age 45 and older, you need to have your first colonoscopy. Please don't let the doctors talk you out of it. Symptoms include chronic constipation. It's something that we battle with as a culture because of the way we eat, because of stress. We carry stress in our guts. So you have to understand how important it is for you to be honest with your doctors and tell them what you're feeling so that you don't sit in pain and suffering for no reason at all. If you need care and that doctor is not being kind to you, not being respectful to you, not treating you with dignity when you are making your issues present, it is for you to treat them like the boyfriend or the girlfriend you break up with because they don't do the right thing. Find a new doctor. Okay? And research your doctors the same way you research the new iPhone that's coming out. What's gonna be new about that iPhone 15? The same way we go on Yelp and get reviews about the next new restaurant. You need to do that with your health care, and you need to take the same care with yourself for those doctors and hold them accountable. So I'm glad to say I am 10 years cancer-free. And I've become an advocate because of it. I actually wrote an email to the CDC, and in the mail comes a letter from President Obama and Joe Biden back in 2015 saying that they had received this message. I am not kidding. It's like, I thought it was a joke, a hoax. I didn't open that envelope for like 2 weeks, saying that they appreciated me sharing my story and that March 15, 2015 was going to be the month that they celebrate Colorectal Cancer Month. So now Colorectal Cancer Month is in March. And I want you to please, please, please raise awareness from this meeting that we have today. And I hope something I've shared is helpful to you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I do believe as a community we get better when we talk to each other, when we share our health experiences, when we share how we have selected our doctors or what we found. We know that we talk to each other each and every day. So sometimes I think it's really important that we listen and therefore action when it comes to our health. Dr. White, and I'm going to call you Dr. White because I want to honor all of our Black physicians that we talked to today. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and experience, and more importantly, what the role of early screening from your perspective?
Good morning, everyone. I am, again, Dr. Davida White. I am so happy to be with you all here in Harlem. I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia. By education, I am, oh, we have some Virginians? All right, all right. By education, I am an obstetrician, gynecologist, and as mentioned before, I currently work at Johnson & Johnson, which is a thrill for me. J&J is committed to bringing innovative medicines to patients and also to closing health disparity gaps. You asked me about early screening. Early screening is really important, and you have to have these conversations with your doctors. Usually, whenever we have a disease process in our bodies, whether it's cancer or something less serious, when it's starting, you may not always have signs or symptoms. So that's where screening comes in, and we can find things early enough that we can treat you. You have more treatment options, and if it's something more serious, your survival rates will be much better, and maybe even there's a cure. So it's important that you have these conversations with your physicians about screening.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn back to Diane for a minute. I'll get back to you. When you think about, we all have people in our family, right, who don't go to the doctor, have a lot of reasons why they don't. Could you talk about, from your experience, some of the stories you hear about the why? What's preventing us to really go and get tested to make sure that we have early access to certain therapies?
Okay, few of the things that I hear when I'm in the community, I do a lot of tabling, I do a lot of events like this. One of the main drawbacks or reluctance that people share why they don't go to the doctors, and one thing I mentioned, where they don't feel treated with dignity. Often we walk into the office and we get blamed for being sick. Now, sometimes people just don't know, right? I didn't know. I'm well educated. It didn't mean that, you know, I was uneducated. Why would I think I had colon cancer, right? It's thought of as an old person's disease. It was never discussed in our family. And if someone had passed away, y'all are sitting here, you know what I'm talking about. We don't share the health history of family members. Everything's a big secret. And we have to stop that, because withholding that information is killing a generation ahead of us. So think about that when you're sitting around the table at Thanksgiving, when you're sitting around the table at Christmas or birthdays or the cookout. It's okay to have those conversations about health, because you may not have a next barbecue. You may not share a next Christmas. If you don't give this information, and sharing it with young people is also very important. And I find that people share it's uncomfortable having this conversation about health. Some people are embarrassed. And other people say they don't feel heard when they walk into the doctor's office, or the doctor is speaking in a way that they can't understand what they're saying. So they'd rather not go. And I think the last reason is they feel afraid of the results. A lot of times we know something is wrong, and we won't go to the doctor because we don't want to hear what they're going to tell us. Insurance may not cover it. So you don't even want to think about hearing, I might need this surgery or I might need this procedure, and my insurance isn't going to cover it. So I find that we create sometimes these narratives in our head that don't exist, because maybe if you did share, we would get some answers that could help you. This Black Health Matters Summit, there's a vending room. I would encourage everyone to take information. So if you're sitting here feeling what I'm expressing right now, if you feel ashamed, embarrassed, if you feel like you're not going to get any assistance, I think this is the place that you could get most of the assistance that you need. So those are just a few of the things. And I didn't want to forget the day off from work. People cannot take days off from work to go to the doctor, but we will not take a day off feeling sick to go to work. Think about that. So we have to change how we're treated in our workspaces. And once you put your own health first, they will follow. But as long as you come to work sick, they're never going to let you take that day off sick. So I want us to do better once we know better.
Thank you so much for those recommendations. So we are ready, we are armed, we're walking into the doctor's office. From your perspective, Dr. White, what does that healthcare provider need to do to help us to talk about and understand early access and early detection?
I think it's important for your healthcare provider to provide education. If you do have a diagnosis, You need to make sure you're having conversations to understand what's going on with you, what's happening with my body, and to also understand what your treatment options are. They're also responsible to understand what your barriers are. So you mentioned some of the barriers. They could be emotional or cultural barriers. Fear is a big issue. Afraid of the test, afraid of finding out the results of the test. There are confidentiality concerns that people are also worried about. You may have had a history of abuse, which makes you shy away from certain tests. Also, there are practical barriers that are in place, cost, transportation. There may be a disability that makes it difficult for you to access the tests. And then also knowledge barriers and personal relevance, believing that that disease can't affect me, that issue is not my issue, it's not a part of my family history, not having appropriate knowledge of your family history. So I think with your relationship with your doctor, it's important that you all communicate, partner, and they need to understand what your barriers are. If it's a cost barrier, maybe there's another treatment option that they can offer to you. And I think the last thing is building trust. And you mentioned that today, that there is a lack of trust in some situations. But we need to also be a part of that partnership. And if you don't feel like you trust your physician, then that person is not the person for you.
Yes, thank you for that. So we often, at Johnson & Johnson, we often talk about meeting patients where they are in the community. We often talk about developing medicines that reflect the community and the patients we intend to serve. And it just, as you were speaking, I was thinking, Diane, of the clinical trial journey. And if you were offered an option and different care options that we see along the paradigm, can you talk a little bit about your experience?
I did not have the luxury of a clinical trial. I couldn't participate. 10 years ago, the advancements that have been made to treat colorectal cancer, stage 3 specifically, have definitely come a long way. There was a standard treatment that I took. There were 3 medications, and this was it. I actually had to ask about a clinical trial. One of my friends that I was doing chemotherapy with was in a trial. And I later learned that there's a criteria to be considered for the trials. So everybody just doesn't get access. Back then, there was no representation, or I should say, like lack of representation of Black people participating in clinical trials. Since then, there has been the Henrietta Lacks bill that has been introduced to Congress, which I had the pleasure of introducing to Chuck Schumer's office 2 years ago, when we went to lobby at Cancer Day with American Cancer Society. And that bill is to make sure that Black people are represented in clinical trials. I think we're apprehensive about them because of the Henrietta Lacks story and the Tuskegee Institute experiment. So there are a few things and ways that we've been mistreated. But I'm here to tell you that if I had that option, I would have taken it. There's no way I wanted to do chemotherapy that long, live with these results, and have to suffer through all of these things that I'm left with for the rest of my life. The way neuropathy works when it's induced by chemo, whatever you're left with after a year is what you will have for the rest of your life. So think about that. It took 8 months for these medications to wipe out my reproductive system and cause nerve damage. So I'm employing you to participate if you have the opportunity. I asked my doctor, and he said I was not a candidate. That specific trial, and trials are specific. I learned this going to get a public health degree. So it's not always a racial issue. Sometimes it's just we don't meet the criteria. So I was a person who only had colorectal cancer, and this trial was for someone who had gotten lung cancer and brain cancer after their colorectal cancer. So I didn't meet the criteria. But right now there are plenty of trials that are existing out here, and you should ask your doctors about them. Hopefully they'll begin to make more signage about it in the doctor's offices. But if you get a call from some of these places, I would implore you to listen hear what they have to say, because you could be a candidate if they have them for heart disease, diabetes, like all the things we are affected with. So I didn't have the opportunity, but I definitely would have taken part in one if it was offered to me.
Great, thank you so much. One final question for Dr. White. What advice do you give to us as we walk into a physician's office with whatever ailment or disease or early detection option that we might want to talk about? What questions do we ask? How do we arm ourselves with information before we go in? And how is that physician looking at us as a patient that should help drive the conversation versus rushing us out the door in 5 minutes? What does that experience need to be to make sure we get the information that we need?
I think we have to take charge of our health visits. You need to go in there armed with the questions that you want to ask. If you've been given a diagnosis, it is important that you understand that diagnosis and how it affects you. And also, you need to be very specific in asking, what are all of my treatment options? I think sometimes as physicians or healthcare providers, people understand your barriers. They think they understand your barriers. So based on that, they may offer you this option. But you need to be armed with all of the information so you can be a partner in that decision. And as we just heard, some of those options may include therapies that are still in development, but you want to be aware of that. But it also means that you need to do your own homework. Learn about your disease process. Come back, have questions. For a lot of us, it may be important to bring a care partner along, another family member, a daughter, a husband, to help you ask the right questions. And also, sometimes when we hear information that we're not expecting to hear, you miss really important parts of the conversation. So we want someone else there in the room to help listen for you. These are some really important things. And understand your screenings, right? There are a whole bunch. We talked about colorectal today. But if you're a woman, you want to know about your mammograms. You should be getting those every year, starting at 45. And then at 55, they move to every 2 years. Your pap smears, they should start around 21, 25. You need to get those every 3 years. There are HPV tests that you can get every 5 years, or some even in conjunction with the pap smear. For our gentlemen, you should get your prostate checked at 50 years of age. You need to start getting that done on an annual basis. But if you have a medical history or family history, that needs to be bumped up to 45. So you need to have a conversation about your whole entire medical history, and not just around the ailments that brought you into the office today, but what are some preventative things I can do to help keep me out of the office?
Great, thank you so much. So we heard a couple things. We know that early detection saves lives. We heard that being an empowered patient, really going in there informed and educating yourself. We learned that taking time with a physician may not want to take time with you, but you make sure you take time with them. We heard that you need to ask questions and make sure that you leave with information and then follow up. So I want to thank both of you for your time today. Thank you so much for sharing your patient journey. Thank you to Dr. White. If we have a couple of time, we might want to take 1 or 2 questions if anyone has anything.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for that information. Unfortunately, my mother passed from colon cancer. I do get colonoscopies every 3 years. They have removed tubular adenomas, so as of now, I'm cleared. I have a 21 and a 23-year-old. When should I be telling them to insist to have their doctors give them a prescription for having a colonoscopy? Is it too early? Are they too young?
The guidelines say 45, but again, that's based on the average individual, and that does not take risk factors into consideration. So that's a very personal question. I think that's the opportunity you have to take to go in, have that conversation with your physician, make sure they understand your complete family history, what that disease course looked like for your family, and then you all can come up with a schedule that works for you.
I will always say, also say for me, since I did have cancer, my children have to be screened 10 years pre my diagnosis. So since I was diagnosed at 44, they all have to go at age 34.
Good morning, panel. First and foremost, I'd like to thank God because God is good. I'm a 3-time breast cancer survivor myself. Yes, 3 times. And I want to know how we can encourage our younger generation to go and get the test, because a lot of women are so afraid of the pain, but it's worth the pain to know and to be at peace with yourself. How can we encourage them? Because it's just not going anywhere with the young people, and we should get it done at an earlier age. I was 50, and I had it every 6 years. I got it in 2008, 2014, 2020. I'm an advocate for plant-based eating. I do that. I lost 26 pounds. So, and we want to see our young women out here, outside and doing what we need to do, but we got to be healthy to do it. So, what's your advice on that?
I think to educate, and don't give up. You know, Diane has shared her amazing journey and her testimony from going from a patient to an advocate, but we can be an advocate at home. We can be an advocate to our family members, you know, and be that voice, even though we may get on their nerves, to just continue to stress to them the importance of getting screened.
They call me the cancer bully in my neighborhood. I don't care. I do not care. I am always on any social media bothering people about a colonoscopy, all right? So don't give up. But I can tell you there are some organizations. Sister, Give Me Your Hand. Hear me? Sister, Give Me Your Hand is an organization. Dr. Vivian B., who is an amazing breast oncologist, that organization will literally come pick you up and take you to your mammogram. So look them up. Look them up. There are organizations that will help our young folks if they're afraid, and you also need to be in a place that's caring, right? Who does like that hurts. That mammogram is a nightmare, and you know man created it. Sorry, men. It definitely was not created by a woman, but that's one way, giving them resources, that they feel comfortable with to take them.
Thank you. We have one last question. And by the way, this panel is sponsored by Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine. You can also go by their table if you have additional questions.
Good morning. My name is Charles Henry, and I have a testimony. God healed me from 3 cancers. I had kidney cancer, prostate cancer, and one of the abdomen called dermatofibrosarcoma. My question to you ladies is, what do we do to get the men to go to the doctor? The Holy Spirit healed me, but we need to get the fellas to go to the doctor. You know, because I'm going to tell you, God is totally amazing. And all of y'all have testimonies. I'm going to tell you something. I'm a part of the Montefiore Einstein family. I'm an advocate, I'm a bold buddy, and I'm a doula. So what I'm saying is we need to rely on God more, hang on to the word, and go to the doctor. That's all I got to say.
Did you have a response?
I mean, it tugs on my heart as a mother of 3 sons, high school and college age. I understand, you know, the role that we play as mothers sometimes in being able to educate them and surround them. And I said the only thing I've been doing as a mother of 3 is making sure that they, you know, surround themselves with individuals who look like them, whether that's men's groups, prayer breakfasts, any way to really educate them and about their health and put their health first. But it's a journey. It's a journey with them to feel comfortable to ask questions. It's a journey with them to be vulnerable, to be able to educate themselves on the process or what they have their questions about. But I think it takes a village. We all know it takes a village to raise these kids. And I would say that, you know, each and one of us play a role, whether you have a son or you don't have a son, whether you have a cousin or a neighbor or an uncle. I think it takes each one of us to help make sure that they understand that their health is extremely important, and they as individuals are extremely loved by each and one of us.
Thank you for that, Stacey. I'll just share this with the men. I do something called Cognac and Conversations. Sorry, I'm not promoting alcohol, but I'm meeting the men where they are, right? So Cognac and Conversations is a men's event, and that's what it is. It's all about conversation with good drinks, good food, but I bring the doctors out of their offices into the community at whatever bar we're at. No white coats, no stethoscopes allowed. And they come in and they speak to the community just like people. You will find doctors who are here. If you come into the community, you will get more patients in one space than will ever walk through your office. So I want you to think about those nonprofit organizations or CBOs who do events like that to get folks out. And then we started Say It With Love, we did our first one last May in honor of dads during Father's Day. And again, we brought in doctors into the community, but we fed them, we decorated, we made it beautiful, because women, we do stuff really nice. If we get the men to do it, they're gonna put some white tablecloths down. They just gonna be like, look, whatever, we're gonna have some wings today. But instead, we made it really beautiful, we elevated it, and it was in honor of my husband. My husband, I lost him 20 months ago to a heart attack suddenly on our 29th wedding anniversary. And I'm here to tell you that he did not present with any type of underlying heart condition. Yet he had kidney failure, and he also had a heart condition that none of us knew about. Did he go to the doctor all the time? No. However, he was 54, and I'm a living witness to tell you that it is important for you to recognize anything in your body that does not feel good. Just acknowledge it. Go see someone who's a specialist. I can't tell you what it was like for my children to later tell me they were cutting school because they were afraid to come home and find me dead while I was doing chemo. So I need you to think about how you're not sharing information with your family members and young people. I also need you to think about what you leave behind when you just go suddenly and it was preventable. That's the key word. Some stuff is preventable, but you do have to say something. Doctors cannot help you if you are not vocal about it. And you don't want to go through what my family has gone through. We've been through some stuff, but we are still standing. But if you don't have to go through what I went through, please take advantage of what's here for us in this democratic country.
Thank you so much for your time.